I'm Tori O'Neill.
Hi, I'm Chris Pearson, and this is
Slash Source History of the Americas. Today we'll be talking about the Latin American independence movement.
But isn't Latin a dead language?
Not that type of Latin America. Regina, roll the intro.
So, as most revolutions, I'm assuming, the Latin American independence movements began with a set of causes. These causes can be grouped into NPREES. Not one person really enjoys economic sanctions. North Korea. Napoleonic Wars, political causes, religion, economic causes, the Enlightenment, and social causes.
Yes, the first of which being political causes. Corruption was a large part of Spanish society in the Americas, with the Catholic Church being the biggest contributor of this corruption. The Church had a large influence in the royal and political business of Spain. Since the Church had so much money, they were able to bribe the royalty so that policies would be made in their favor. Also, there was a history of religious intolerance in Spain.
Jews and Muslims were pushed out after 1492 when Queen Isabel I of Castile and King Ferdinand II of Aragon took power of Spain and drove out the Moors. Later on in the 1700s, there was a power shift after the Habsburg line ended, with probably the handsomest man in existence, Charles II, El Hexito. Philip V then took over, and he was part of the Bourbon family. The power shift to the Bourbons brought a new series of reforms known as the Bourbon Reforms. Some of these reforms included more investment in the primary sector, an increase in troops stationed in the Americas. All these reforms were focused on the idea of being a more efficient country and caused there to be more production in the colonies. The political atmosphere of Spain was not only cause of revolution, as the set of economic causes contributed greatly as a catalyst. First, slaves were very common in Latin America, just as they were in America. Both indigenous and African people were enslaved to the upper class plantation owners. Also, there was a set of rights called Fueros, which were privileges to the Spanish gentlemen that allowed them to not pay taxes to the Spanish government, like how these days Donald Trump claims to not pay his taxes to the federal government. Therefore, this allowed for the Spanish gentlemen to be socially and economically higher up than the Creoles who paid their taxes. Thirdly, the upper class kept control of the monetary funds and didn't redistribute it to the other lower classes. This element pushed the divide.
Social causes were another large part of Latin American independence movements. This caste system was a social hierarchy used by the Spanish colonies in order to create order among the colonists. Not much different than the social divide due to income. At the top of the caste system were the Peninsulares, which are people who were born in Spain and moved to the colonies. Below them are the Creoles, who were of Spanish descent but they were born in the colonies. Below them are the Mestizos, who are half Spanish, half indigenous, born in the Spanish colonies. The blending of this culture is called Mestizaje. Below them are the indigenous people, African people, which were slaves, and Zambos, which are 50% African and 50% indigenous. This caste system caused social injustice due to the Creoles, who were the largest and the majority of the population, seeing it unfair that the Peninsulares were higher than them in the social aspect. It's like Scar's desire to rule in The Lion King. This system pushed a divide amongst the colonists and a bigger call for equality from each of the castes, thus sparking revolution.
There were also many religious causes of independence. The Inquisition was the court that was part of the Spanish government, looking primarily for religious dissenters, Jews, Muslims, etc., and had a large Catholic bias. However, more importantly, there was much corruption to be found in the church. The Catholic Church was the largest landowner in the colonies, giving them a lot of political power in both the colonies and in Spain. This, of course, led to several issues with different groups, including the king and colonists themselves. To curb religious power, the Act of Consolidation was created in 1804 to expel Jesuits. It caused financial instability in the colonies, allowing for many church loans and capital to cause financial unrest in several areas, and financial loss of the Jesuits allowed for more power to the crown.
The Napoleonic Wars were the largest and most prominent cause of the Latin American independence movements. Being Napoleon invaded Spain in 1810 and soon took Madrid a short while later. Once Madrid was in French hands, he made his brother Joseph Bonaparte king of Spain, because obviously that's how politics works. The Spanish colonies were not sure who to support. Should they support the new Spanish government, or should they support the old? The viceroys in Spanish America refused to recognize Joseph as king, and they had no instructions from the old Spanish government as to what to do. Due to this, the viceroys ran their own affairs in these colonies. After the Napoleonic Wars, when Napoleon's butt was handed to them by Austria and the UK, some viceroys in Latin America used to running the country by themselves without Spanish assistance felt that they should run the country by themselves. Therefore, this inspired Spanish colonists to fight for their independence and to govern themselves, since they already had the ability to govern themselves.
The Enlightenment in the Spanish colonies was delayed as the Catholic Church attempted to stop the spread of Enlightenment ideas with the Inquisition. However, Enlightenment ideas still came to the colonies and drew inspiration from the Haitian, American, and French Revolution. Independent thinking was also spread by skepticism of authority, observation of nature, experimentation, analysis due to deductive reasoning. The Enlightenment brought ideas that colonists and natives would have never thought of otherwise, while the readings of Enlightenment writings increased the alertness of the Inquisition. The heightened awareness brought the need of Spain into further question. These ideas excited many members of Latin America's society, especially the Creoles. On top of all these facts, a victory against a British blockade on Spanish colonies made colonists realize that they don't need Spain to be successful. This was crucial for the independent movements because now the uprising was spreading across Latin America with massive support.
Did you say Enlightenment?
Oh no, what have I done this time?
It's time for Guess That Enlightenment Thinker. Colin, give me the question. Who's the Enlightenment thinker that started a violent revolution and gave the speech, The Grito de Dolores? Miguel Hidalgo. That's right, other Tory. Thanks, other Tory. Speaking of Hidalgo, let's discuss him now. Hidalgo was an extremely liberal man who preached his extremist ideas to the people of his church. Some examples of this were, hell does not exist and sex outside of marriage isn't a sin. He himself had a mistress with several illegitimate daughters. Together with his friend Ignacio Allende, Juan Aldama, Miguel Dominguez, and his wife La Corregidora, they plotted an insurrection for December of 1810. Word of the rebellion, however, spread, and minor members of the reforms were arrested in September. Hidalgo, Aldama, and Allende fled, fearing arrest. They went to Hidalgo's church in Dolores. Execution was imminent, so they rang the church bells, summoning the field workers. To the workers, he gave an impassioned speech called Grito de Dolores, or the Cry of the Dolores. There's no record of exactly what he said, but the belief he said, Viva la Libertad, y Viva la Virgen de Guadalupe, phrases common during the Latin American independence movements.
Many regard this day, September 16th, as the first day of Mexican independence. The mob, consisting mostly Indians, headed towards San Miguel, carrying the banner of the Virgin of Guadalupe. With the help of Allende's military in San Miguel, they ransacked the town, looting and sacking Spaniard property, leaving dozens dead. Hidalgo led his insurgency to dozens of more victories, killing dozens of villagers in the process. At moments, the rebellion lost momentum, but carried on, with Hidalgo's fatal mistake, that is. Against his partner Allende's advice, Hidalgo fought with General Felix Calleja, army of 7,000, which had been regaining Hidalgo's cities. The army battled it out in Calderon, a city near Guadalajara. After 6 hours, a royalist troop made a lucky shot at the rebellion's ammunition dump. The insurgency fled with only 1,000 men. After this fatal error, Hidalgo was deposed and the group was caught near Monclova. Allende was shot in the back while Hidalgo was subjected to Inquisition torture. On July 30th, he was shot dead by a firing squad. The heads of Hidalgo and his men were shown on the Alhondiga, their most notorious massacre. This was the end of Hidalgo's rebellion. Like Hidalgo, Morales was a priest who studied at Valladolid and didn't have much respect for his vocation. Once word of Hidalgo's rebellion broke out, Morales immediately offered his services as a chaplain to the insurgency. But instead he was assigned to the revolt in southern Mexico. Instead of Hidalgo's poorly trained group of rebels, Morales recruited and trained 1,000 infantry and 2,000 cavalry, much more effective in battle. He staged guerrilla attacks around the mountains, surprising royalist convoys, and disrupted their lines of communication. While Hidalgo's uprising faded, Morales captured the town of Chilpancingo north of Acapulco, then seized the town of Cuautla, 40 miles south of Mexico City. As the rebellion moved towards Mexico City, recuperating at Chilpancingo, there they put together Congress to proclaim Mexican independence and established a political structure. Many decided that Morales be the supreme chief or servant of the nation.
In his inaugural speech, Morales said that the basis of the new republic should be such as to moderate both opulence and indigence by raising the wages of the poor, improving the habits and lifting them above ignorance, plunder, and theft. This constitution was written up by the Congress and was seen as quite sophisticated and well-intentioned. It established separation of powers, an elected group of representatives, the outlawing of slavery, and racial equality. Morales was executed in 1815, however. The group trekked southwards towards Puebla to escape a trap, but they encountered 600 troops. He sacrificed himself to the troops in order for his own troops to escape, and he was taken to Mexico City. He, like Hidalgo, was tortured by the Inquisition and faced his execution with a brave face. He was shot twice in the back. While his rebellion escaped, their momentum faded away. While both these rebellions were failures, they created precedents for the insurgencies to come. The rebellions in Mexico, why was Simón Bolívar so successful in the liberation movements? Well, Simón Bolívar, the symbol of liberation struggle in northern South America, was born in Caracas, Venezuela in 1783. He was born into a Creole family with lots of land, slaves, and mines. His intellect was greatly influenced by the reading of the Enlightenment. He traveled to European countries between 1803 and 1807, which further widened his mindset and intellectual horizons. He returned to Caracas and became involved in activities that were directed at the overthrow of the Spanish government. He, however, was sent to Britain to solicit British aid, but he didn't get any. He did, however, get veteran revolutionary Francisco de Miranda and returned to Venezuela and to take command of the Patriot Army. With his forces degrading after a few years, Miranda attempted to negotiate a treaty with the royalist commander, and then he tried to leave the country with part of the Republicans' money. Bolivar seized Miranda before he could leave and turned him over to the Spaniards. Miranda died in prison 4 years later.
Due to the turning over of Miranda, Spaniards allowed Bolivar to leave the country without harm. Bolivar departed for New Granada, where here he was given command of a small detachment of troops, and his goal was to clean the Magdalenian River. He used swift movements, aggressive tactics, and the advancement of soldiers for merit without regard to social background or color. A victory at Trujillo gained Bolivar the rank of general in the Colombian army and approval for the liberation of Venezuela in a forced march of 3 months. He led 500 men through Venezuela's regions towards Caracas, but in Venezuela the Spaniards unleashed a reign of terror against all patriots. At Trujillo, halfway to Caracas, Bolivar proclaimed a war to the death of all Spaniards. As Bolivar approached Caracas, the Spanish troops withdrew and he entered the city in triumph and received the title of Liberator. The fall of Napoleon in 1814 brought Ferdinand back to the Spanish throne, and in doing so he released Spanish troops for more use in Spanish America. The Enlightenment way of thinking, the culturedness of Bolivar, and Francisco de Miranda allowed for Bolivar to be successful in his liberation movements in South America. Martin was born to a well-to-do family. His father was a professional soldier, and he was educated in the Seminary of Nobles in Madrid. In his early life, he became a distinguished leader who trained soldiers. He was also very well known in his campaigning throughout the other Latin American countries that were trying to revolt against their mother countries, mostly Spain and the occasional Portugal.
A series of revolutionary groups found an excuse in the capture of the Spanish king Fernando VII and the French occupation of Spain during the Peninsular War to call an open cabildo with the hopes of discussing the political situation. The conflicts of the crown's authorities started in Buenos Aires when Spain declared a full monopoly on trade, banning commerce with English, French, and Portuguese merchants whose ships were now prohibited from entering the Buenos Aires port. Further distance came in between the viceroys and the crown authority in 1806/1807 when British invasions. With no Spanish military support, local militia groups defended their city and their own street from attacks from the British and were so successful that half of the British soldiers were either killed, injured, and thus causing British to retreat. The colonists' major success was defeating Britain in the invasion of the River Plate. The battle was caused pride among the colonists because they managed to defend themselves without Spain, planting the seeds for revolution. The victory that the colonists in Rio de la Plata would help to shape the successes of a more independent movement to come in Latin America, thus allowing Latin American independence movements to become successful as a whole. The economy was most affected by independence and movements that came with it. There were a lot of negative effects, and those outweighed the positives. For one, farms and silver mines were abandoned so that men could be in the military to fight. Therefore, there was little growth in the primary sector, agriculture for all you non-economists out there, and a 75% decrease in silver production. Another economic impact was that after the wars, newly independent countries had created a whole new economy and had to create a completely different currency as well. This and similar economic outcomes led to the continuing financial struggle of Latin American citizens. Also, population grew and slowed African Americans with immigration levels and falling Peninsulares leaving their former colonies. This growth led to a lack of human capital and money, since the Peninsulares were very wealthy. Limited economic growth that was able to take place because of the people that are essential to a successful economy. When the soldiers came back from the war, less died from the actual fighting than they did from the disease, which became somewhat widespread in the former colonies and hindered the economic growth as more people became sick and unable to work. However, not everything was negative. There were some positives of the Latin American independence movements on the economy. For one, some businesses and industries did thrive, including the cattle industry in Argentina. Also, the land abandonment faced during the wars was solved and allowed for higher efficiency with those lands. In addition, new trade relations resulted from the American independence movements and Latin American independence movements. Britain had become a primary trading partner to the Latin Americans once the ports reopened. Imports grew from 37,000 pounds to 400,000 pounds in a mere 5-year period. The economic changes decreased production and immigration, as well as the trade relations with Great Britain, shaped the economy of Latin America.
Finally, social groups felt many of the effects of independence. The indigenous people felt the freedoms from the Latin American independence movement, and communal lands were divided among the Indians so that they can own their own land plots. However, in certain countries, not much was done to enforce this. Also, tributes were forced to be paid to the government as a source of income and revenue. The Creoles perhaps felt the largest social effects of independence. The Creoles now had more control over themselves since the Peninsulares were no longer in power, and many of them moved back to Spain. The Creoles now had the dominance and power over Latin America since the Peninsulares went back to Spain. America also felt impacts from independence. Africans now demanded their liberties. They took inspiration from the colonists' independence. The idea of free birth came about, the idea that Africans born were no longer slaves. While this was law, it was not enforced and took many years for those rights to become reality. Even so, the ideas of social justice and liberty from the shift in power from the Peninsulares to Creoles allowed change to come, proving that the independence movements did in fact have a large impact on the daily lives of Latin Americans. We can see that the Latin American independence movements largely shaped the modern countries we see today, with things such as causes, leadership, military campaigns, the effects, and Argentina.
So, do you think that the Latin American independence movements were actually revolutionary? Do you think they really changed things for the people of Latin America?
Let us know in the comments below.
As we say in our hometown,
Don't forget to be awesome.
Oh.
America. source.
Hi, I'm Tori and Chris.
Hi, I'm Chris Pearson.
And this is
Slash
Course
history,
History.
not course source. Not
This is fun. This is fun.
the U.S. government. We must rise together. March on the Capitol.
You should have put that in the bloopers.
No, don't do that.
Well, hi, I didn't see you there. My name's Christina Pearson, and welcome to Slash Source History of the Americas. The Enlightenment in the Spanish colonies
What in the world?
was delayed by the Catholic Church.
Hold on. Hold on.
Your arm was in the way, so I had...
Whew, nothing like 4 hours of sleep to get you going. Okay. And today we will be talking about Latin American independence movements. Wait, we need to do that.
Oh, I didn't see you there.